Hey, I want to take some time today to kind of combine two questions that I get quite often into one video here. And those questions are, should I get a gun trust? And what do you think about the possibility of mass gun confiscations in the United States? Do I think it will happen, and how will it happen? So I want to kind of combine those two things, like I said, into one video today. First off, I want to talk about gun trusts. Now, I have a gun trust. I've got mine right here. And I have a gun trust for one reason. Actually, for two reasons. One, I have, several NFA items that I definitely want to go to my children if something happens to me. So I think it's good for me to have a trust. Now, a lot of people hear nowadays that a lot of the advantages that they used to have with trusts don't exist anymore, thanks to Obama. And that is true, but there's still a lot of advantages to a trust. Now, I'm not going to say you should have a gun trust if you've got 3 or 4 or 5 guns. And especially not if you don't even have children or anyone you want to give them to. But if you have anything, even if you just have one gun, if it's of high sentimental value, you might want to have a gun trust. But I would recommend them to pretty much anybody. And here's why. I have kids. I want my kids to have my guns when I pass away. If I don't have them in my trust, now my NFA items are in my trust. My oldest son is on my trust now. So if something happens to me, he already owns those items. They don't have to go through probate or anything. They don't have to be listed in the will. He already owns them because he's on my trust. Now, if they weren't listed in my trust, those guns could become part of my estate. Like if I owed somebody money or someone just sued me and said I owed them money, those guns could possibly end up in the hand of creditors or supposed creditors and not in the hands of my children. If they're in a trust, they get them automatically. It's already their property. It doesn't become part of my estate. We're like joint owners. So I think trusts are a great thing to have, whether you have NFA items or not. Especially if you have, like I said, sentimental items, or if you have a substantial collection. Like I have over 100 firearms. I'm not bragging, I'm old. That's like 2 guns a year, not even, that I've been able to collect. That's not counting the phaser on the wall back there. So, of course, I want my guns in a trust because I want them to go to my kids and I don't want them to be taken by creditors or anybody else. And I'm not saying I owe people money because I don't owe anybody money that I know of. But let's say I die owing a mortgage, or someone says, hey, you never paid your mortgage, or you never paid your car payment, and blah, blah, blah. Well, they can file liens against my estate. And I don't want that happening to my kids. I don't have to deal with that. I want them to get my firearms. So a trust is good for that. But there's also another thing a trust is really good for, and that's kind of answering the second question about whether I think mass confiscations are a possibility in this country. Well, I think just going door to door and taking guns would cause such a hubbubaloo that there'd be shots being fired, and the government doesn't want that. So I think one of the possibilities in the future for mass gun confiscations is estates. Now, hear me out on this, because right now it's pretty easy to inherit a gun. But if you pay attention to a lot of the proposed laws lately, even laws that are about like safe storage, etc., they got a lot of little other things tacked onto them. And one thing I've seen tacked on a lot is regarding inheriting firearms. Now, under the law right now, if you inherit a firearm, all you have to do is be legally able to own a firearm to just go get it, and it's yours, even if it's in another state. But a lot of these laws are wanting to push to say, well, the state has a responsibility to make sure you can own a firearm. And that's a first step in saying, okay, this person dies, they have a lot of guns. Well, we don't know yet if their kids are capable of owning firearms, whether they're good people. So we're going to take them into state custody, meaning they're going to confiscate your collection and hold it until they can verify whether your children can have your guns or not, or your heirs, whoever they are, your spouse, whatever. And because of this, most of these laws don't set any criteria for how long they can hold them, whether they can charge you fees to hold them for you, etc. So you could very easily find a situation in the future where a lot of guns are taken out of circulation by seizing estates. Let's face it, a lot of guns are in the hands of guys my age. Now you might think, well, a lot of 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds own guns, and even early 40s. Yeah, but guys in my age group, that 45 and up and even 50 and up like me, we own a lot of guns. We own a massive part of the collection of guns in this country. So if they started seizing our estates when we died, let's say I do something stupid and I pass away, like, I go rock climbing without a rope, or I try to put on both of my socks without taking a break in between, and I die of a heart attack. Well, the state could say, well, we don't know if your kids can own these guns yet if it's not in a trust. And they could say, well, we're going to confiscate all your guns and we're going to hold them until we can verify that they're good people. And then, since there's no restriction on time, they can take as long as they want. That could be a de facto confiscation in itself right there. But then let's say, okay, they do finally say, okay, you can have the guns. Well, they could call you out of the blue 7.5 years after they seize the guns and say, hey, we finally did your background checks and you're fine. You can collect the guns. The fees for storage, for the background checks, for maintenance, etc., well, that's 110 grand. So do you want us to write us a check or cash? You've got 72 hours to pay us, and if you don't, we confiscate the guns. That's a very big possibility. So if I see any mass confiscations coming in the future, it's by seizing the guns of people that have already passed. Because these laws make sense on paper to a lot of people. Well, yeah, if some guy dies and he's got an automatic rifle or even just a handgun, before they just hand it off to someone who's never passed a background check, it should be cleared by the government. That makes sense to a lot of people. Doesn't make sense to me, but it makes sense to a lot of people. And things like this get voted in because they show them the parts that make sense to them, and then they vote for it, not paying attention to the parts that don't make sense, like the fact that there's no time restrictions. It's the same thing with people saying, oh, we got to get rid of that 3-day requirement for the NFA. Or for the ATF to be able to get back on background checks, because that's just tying their hands. No, that's saying they don't get to sit on something forever and say, well, we don't want to ban you, but we're just not going to let you ever get cleared, so you can't have your gun. That 3-day limit makes it where they can't do that. Those limits don't exist in most of these proposed laws. So you can very easily find yourself in a situation where your guns are held by the state for as long as they want, and then they charge whatever they want for your children to get them back. And let's not forget that when something is confiscated by the state, it's very seldomly returned in the condition that it was taken in. So they're probably going to be damaged or lost, even if they do get taken and you somehow get them back. So that kind of answers the questions, both of them right there. Do I fear mass gun confiscations in the future? Yes, I do think so. But I don't think it's going to be a door-to-door confiscation. I think they're going to do it through taking people's estates. Because as people in my generation start dying off, if they can claim those guns, that's a lot of guns out of the hands of citizens. And as far as a gun trust, yes, I think you should have one. Like I said, if you have guns you don't want taken away from your family, if you have a substantial collection period, if you have NFA items, that's a no-brainer. You should have it if you have any of those things. But say you just have a collection of 15 guns or 10 guns. Well, I say still get a trust. They're not expensive. Someone says, well, how hard are they to get? People always ask me. I'm like, I don't know. I just went into my dealer, and for a small amount of money, they did it for me. It was all set up for me. All I got to do is write things down in the back. So it's not hard to get. And it's definitely an advantage. There's no disadvantage to it, really, if you ask me. So, do I believe mass confiscations are coming? Like I've already said, I told you how I think that's going to happen. And as far as gun trusts go, if you've got a reason to have one, you should definitely have one. And even if you don't have a reason to have one, there's still a good reason to have one.